The old church stood on a hill overlooking the town. It had been abandoned for years, and no one dared to go near it at night. There were stories of ghosts and demons that haunted the church, and no one wanted to risk an encounter with them. One night, a group of teenagers decided to go to the church to see if the stories were true. They snuck out of their homes and made their way up the hill to the church. When they got there, they saw that the doors were unlocked. They cautiously stepped inside, and the air was thick with dust and cobwebs. The teenagers wandered through the church, looking for signs of the supernatural. They found a few old pews, a pulpit, and a stained glass window. But there was nothing out of the ordinary. Just when they were about to give up, they heard a noise coming from the basement. They followed the sound and found a staircase leading down into darkness. They hesitated for a moment, but then they decided to go down the stairs. The basement was even darker than the church itself. The teenagers could barely see their hands in front of their faces. They walked slowly, careful not to trip over anything. Suddenly, they heard a voice. "Hello?" the voice said. The teenagers froze. They looked at each other, fear in their eyes. "Who's there?" one of them asked. "I'm here," the voice said. "In the dark." The teenagers didn't know what to do. They wanted to run, but they were afraid of what might happen if they did. "What do you want?" one of them asked. "I want to play," the voice said. "Will you play with me?" The teenagers didn't know what to say. They were too scared to speak. "Come on," the voice said. "Let's play a game." The teenagers slowly started to back away. They didn't want to play this game. "Don't go," the voice said. "I won't hurt you." But the teenagers didn't believe the voice. They turned and ran up the stairs, not stopping until they were out of the church. They ran all the way back to town, and they never went back to the church again. To this day, no one knows who or what was in the basement of the church. But the teenagers who went there that night will never forget the experience. The next day, the teenagers told their friends about what they had seen and heard in the church. Their friends didn't believe them at first, but then they started to hear stories about the church too. Soon, everyone in town was talking about the church. Some people said it was haunted by ghosts, while others said it was the home of a demon. No one dared to go near the church at night, and even during the day, people would walk past it quickly, their eyes downcast. One day, a group of adults decided to go to the church to investigate. They brought flashlights and cameras, and they were determined to find out what was really going on there. The adults entered the church and made their way down to the basement. They were surprised to find that it was much cleaner than they had expected. There were no cobwebs or dust, and the floor was swept. The adults walked around the basement looking for anything out of the ordinary. They didn't see anything at first, but then they heard a noise coming from behind a pile of boxes. The adults cautiously approached the boxes and peered around them. They saw a small, dark room. The only light came from a candle on a table in the center of the room. The adults stepped into the room and looked around. They saw a few old chairs, a table, and a bookcase. But the most striking thing in the room was a large wooden cross hanging on the wall. The adults walked over to the cross and looked at it closely. They saw that there was something carved into the wood. It was a symbol that they had never seen before. The adults were about to touch the symbol when they heard a noise behind them. They turned around and saw a figure standing in the doorway. The figure was tall and thin, with long black hair and pale skin. It was wearing a black robe, and its eyes were glowing red. The adults were frozen with fear. They didn't know what to do. The figure took a step towards them. "Hello," it said. "I've been expecting you." The figure took another step towards the adults, and they finally found their voices. "What are you?" one of them asked. "I am the one who has been haunting this church," the figure said. "I am the one who has been playing games with the teenagers." "Why?" the other adult asked. "Because I am bored," the figure said. "I have been here for centuries, and I have seen everything. I am tired of the same old things. I need something new." "And what do you want from us?" the first adult asked. "I want you to play a game with me," the figure said. "A game of life and death." The adults looked at each other, fear in their eyes. They didn't know what to do. "What do you mean?" the second adult asked. "I mean that I will give you a choice," the figure said. "You can either play my game or you can die." The adults didn't have to think about it for long. They knew that they had to play the figure's game. "We'll play," the first adult said. "Good," the figure said. "The rules are simple. I will ask you a question, and you will have to answer it correctly. If you answer incorrectly, you will die." The figure paused for a moment. Then it asked its first question. "What is the meaning of life?" The adults looked at each other, puzzled. They didn't know the answer to that question. "I don't know," the first adult said. "Then you die," the figure said. The figure raised its hand, and a bolt of lightning struck the adult. The adult screamed in pain, then it was gone. The second adult was horrified. They knew that they had to answer the figure's question correctly, or they would die too. "The meaning of life is to find love and happiness," the second adult said. "That is correct," the figure said. "You have passed the first test." The figure asked the second adult several more questions, and the second adult answered them all correctly. "You have passed all of my tests," the figure said. "You are worthy to live." The figure disappeared, and the adults were left alone in the basement. They didn't know what had just happened, but they were glad to be alive. They left the church and never went back. They told their story to the police, but the police didn't believe them. They said that the adults had probably imagined the whole thing, but the adults knew what they had seen, and they knew that the church was haunted by something evil. They never forgot the night they played a game of life and death with the demon in the basement. The church still stands on the hill overlooking the town. It is still abandoned, and no one dares to go near it at night. But the adults know that the demon is still there, waiting for its next victim.